Good morning to all of you, and welcome to this, the 73rd Republic Day of our nation. Recently, when I was thinking about what I should speak to you this morning, my mind wandered to the many headlines that we've been bombarded with over the past year. And one story that seems to have made headlines in India, and not only in our country but around the world, is that of the prevalence of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected each and every one of us the world over in some way or the other. We have all reached a stage where we all want to move away from this pandemic and start our lives in the way that we used to. But at least for the moment, it seems that we have all got to live with the pandemic till things settle down. This morning, I thought I would share with you a certain compelling story that I read recently. The story is based in a place called as Phoenix in Arizona. It's a true story. It's a story about a 26-year-old mother who has a child who is 6 years old who is affected with a terminal illness. And although the mother's heart is filled with sadness, she had a strong desire to fulfill her son's dreams in whatever short time that he had to live. So one day she went up to her son's bed and asked him what he wanted to become when he grows up in life. And after giving it some thought, he said that he would like to be a fireman. The reason? So that he could save the lives of those who were in distress. Her mother smiled back at her sick son lying in his bed and told him that she would try her best to fulfill his wishes. Later that day, she went to the local fire station and met the fire chief and explained to him her son's condition and the one wish that he had, which was to be a fireman at least for a day. And she asked the fire chief that she would be very grateful if she would allow her son to ride in a fire engine for at least one day, which would really make his spirits come up. The chief fireman was greatly moved by the story of the little son and said that he could do even better, and said that in a couple of days he would make arrangements for his son to be a part of a trip that he and his fellow firemen would take in the town of Phoenix, Arizona that day. In fact, he said that he would go one better and make him or appoint him as a honorary fireman for a day, and even stitch him clothes that a typical fireman would wear: a cap, the gumboots, the coat, and whatever attire that a fireman in Phoenix, Arizona would wear, since all of them were manufactured locally. And he said that if the mother could give him his size, he would then do the needful regarding his clothes and his gumboots. His mother, of course, was overjoyed and gave the fire chief all the son's measurements. And sure enough, 3 days later, the fire chief, along with his team of 16 firemen, came in their typical fire truck with the bells ringing and the sirens making their usual noise, and came to the son's room in his hospital. The chief fireman himself went up to the young son, who was expecting the fire chief at that point in time, and escorted him to the fire engine truck. That day in Phoenix, there were 3 fire calls, and this young child was able to attend to all these 3 fire calls as an honorary fireman of Phoenix in Arizona. He wore the typical attire that a fireman would wear and even got to drive in 3 different engines. He drove in a fire engine, he was able to drive in the chief's car, and even in a paramedic's van. Having his dream come true, and with all the love and attention that was lavished upon him, the story goes on to say that the little boy was deeply touched, and he went back to the hospital, a very happy young man, and the doctor said that even lived much more longer than he was supposed to, considering the severity of his illness. To cut a long story short, one day the vital signs of his body kept going down, and the head nurse who was attending to him in the ICU that evening realized that he did not have much time to live. So she started phoning all the relatives, and then she thought that why not she'd ring up the chief fireman who would come and help be with him in his time of distress or in his time of his last moments. When she called the fire chief immediately remembered this little boy and said that he would do even better than coming alone. He would bring the entire team of 16 firemen along with him to meet this little boy. He, however, had one request to the head nurse who was in charge of the ICU that evening, that he said that he would like her to keep the windows of the little boy's room open. He also requested that when the fire engines came blaring with their sirens and their horns, they should immediately announce on the PA system of that hospital that there is no true fire. It is just the fire department, the local fire department of Phoenix, Arizona, coming to meet one of their own, coming to meet the little boy who was an honorary fireman for one day not too long ago. So about 5 minutes later, the fire chief arrived with 16 firemen, and they all, in a typical fireman's fashion, instead of coming to the door of the hospital that day, climbed through a ladder through the window and popped out through the window into the little boy's room. And though he was sinking fast, very feebly he turned his head to the commotion that was near the window of his hospital room and gave a faint smile when he saw his friends who were the local firemen. They all went up to him and they hugged him and told him how much they loved him. And in his dying breath, he asked the firemen if he was indeed really such a good fireman as they all claimed to be. Did he live up to their expectations as an honorary fireman on that fateful day? The chief replied that he very much did, and that he was amongst their finest that he ever had. And on hearing the words, the story ends in a very poignant way, that the boy slipped away, closing his eyes for the last time with a faint smile on his lips. The reason why I'm telling you this story this morning is that in our increasingly busy schedules, have we been able to take the time off and help those who are in need? And in doing so, do our bit to help the scores of people who are in dire need of help and support during these trying times. As someone wisely said, the purpose of life is not to be happy, but to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference. Only then can you claim that you have lived and lived well. Unquote. May God in His infinite love and mercy grant you and me the wisdom, the strength, and the conviction to try and be of use to those in need and do our bit to make this world a better place. And in doing so, hope that our children and thereafter our children's children might lead better lives. God bless this great country and this great institution of ours. Thank you.